Financial author Doug Cass once said, when everyone thinks central bankers, money managers, politicians, or any other group are the smartest guys in the room, well, you're in a bubble. Hi, I'm Rob West. That's an interesting quote coming from a hedge fund manager. Are stocks overvalued? Maybe, maybe not. I'll talk about that first today with investing expert Mark Biller and how you should plan either way. And then it's on to your calls at 800-525-7000. That's 800-525-7000. This is MoneyWise Weekend, biblical wisdom for your financial decisions. Well, it's always a delight to have Mark Biller back on the program. Mark's the executive editor of Sound Mind Investing, where they've been teaching investors how to weather market ups and downs for decades. Mark, welcome back to the program.
Thanks, Rob. Good to be back with you.
Mark, I'd love for you to start today by giving us your impression of the markets these days. How overvalued are stocks, and is the stage set for a significant correction anytime soon?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, right?
Yes.
By traditional measures that interpret stock prices through the lens of corporate earnings or U.S. GDP or any of these types of big-picture measures, stocks are clearly quite expensive today. And historically, when we've seen these types of valuations in the past, they have been followed eventually by significant bear markets that did lower valuations significantly. Now, what makes today's situation a little harder to interpret is we're clearly in the middle of a prolonged monetary policy experiment that started way back in 2009 at the end of the financial crisis, and it's never really stopped. We've had the Federal Reserve, along with other central banks all around the world. They've cut interest rates down near zero and held them there, and they've simultaneously used quantitative easing, which is a fancy word for them purchasing financial assets in order to stimulate the financial markets. What we've seen with the COVID response over the last 18 months has really just accelerated all of this to a whole other level. So the net result of all of this is asset prices across the board have just been driven higher. Stocks have, for sure. We've seen that now for a dozen years, but so have home prices, gold prices. Basically, all other types of assets have been going up in price too. And the way to think about that is as the money itself is becoming worth less, the prices of things measured in that money go up. And that's really all inflation is. We hear a lot about inflation today. We've seen this type of inflation in financial asset prices now for a dozen years, and it could be that we're seeing that now on a more micro level as we see more consumer prices going up across the board, as they're adjusting in price to reflect the lower value of these currencies.
Wow. Yeah, there's a lot there. So what are the big picture implications of everything you just shared for investors?
Yeah, I think when you boil it down, the biggest thing is that investors have always had to prepare for the risks of a falling market. We're used to that. That's normal for investors to keep an eye on that. And investors obviously still need to be aware of that possibility that prices could fall. We could have a bear market. The thing that's different now is investors also have to acknowledge the possibility that prices could just keep going up based on these policies. We just don't know because this has never been tried before. And in that scenario, the purchasing power of each dollar is declining. As those asset prices are rising, they're really just kind of floating along to keep their value and purchasing power level. Now, in that case, people who own assets would at least see the value of those assets continue to rise. So basically, I'm saying there are risks on both sides now. There's that normal risk of prices falling, but there's also this new risk of this currency debasement that keeps pushing prices higher. That may not sound like much of a risk, but it can be if you get overly fearful and either pull money out of the market or get too cautious in your investing decisions.
Well, this is an important topic. When we come back, Mark Biller will talk about how we take the fear out of our investing. Mark Biller is the executive editor of Sound Mind Investing, and he joins us regularly on this program. Much more to come just around the corner. And then your calls, 800-525-7000. Stay with us.
Siri, what's the best way to save for college?
I'm not sure.
Well, what does the Bible say about co-signing for a loan or investing for retirement?
I don't know that either, but you can find those answers on the free MoneyWise app.
Really?
Sure. You can connect with the online community and get answers and encouragement from MoneyWise coaches.
That sounds great. Siri, download the MoneyWise app.
Got it. Learn more at moneywise.org.
You probably have a strategy for your finances, your career, even your retirement. But do you have a strategy for your giving? At the National Christian Foundation, we can help you create a giving strategy to inspire your family, maximize your resources, and leave a lasting legacy of faith. To learn how, visit moneywise.org/NCF.
Welcome back to MoneyWise Weekend. I'm Rob West, your host. Joining me today, our good friend and investing expert, Mark Biller. He's also the editor of Sound Mind Investing, the newsletter, and you can find out more at soundmindinvesting.org. We've been talking about whether, in Mark's estimation, the stock market is overvalued or not, and how you should approach that. The risk of being overly aggressive in a market that could see a significant pullback, and the risk of missing out on further upside. All of that can lead to some fear and concern. So, Mark, I know in the latest SMI newsletter, there's an article that I think is just fabulous about taking the fear out of our investing. So I'd love for you to begin in this segment by laying the groundwork for us.
Yeah, sure. So first of all, this particular article is dealing with that more traditional fear of a falling market. When markets fall, investors tend to panic, and that's when most of our worst investing decisions get made. So the key is figuring out how do you put yourself in a position to minimize that type of emotional counterproductive response when markets do act up and those fearful emotions start to rise. And so this article talks about 4 specific steps that you can take now that'll help you stay steady and calm whenever that next panicky time arrives.
Well, that's really helpful. So what's the first step to keeping our emotions in check when there's a market correction?
Yeah, well, the number one way to fight panic is by preparing in advance. And we spend a lot of time at SMI preparing our readers mentally and emotionally for downturns, because we know that those downturns are inevitable. They do come along actually more often than most people think. You know, the long-term trend of the stock market is upward. We've all seen those charts where stocks look like they just keep climbing up and to the right. But the reality is the market regularly hits these sharp reversals where it'll drop 10% or more. And every single time that happens, investors wonder, is this the beginning of the next big downturn? And that panic starts to creep in. So this article talks about a couple of ideas that we regularly discuss at SMI. For older investors, and we're talking retirees, new retirees, one way you can prepare for these pullbacks is by using what we call a bucket strategy, where you might have 2 or 3 years of living expenses set aside in some kind of a savings type investment, like a savings account, CDs, short-term bond funds, real conservative stuff. When you know that you have enough cash to cover your near-term living expenses for a couple of years, then you know you won't have to raid your longer-term investments during a downturn, and that can help keep older investors calm during these market downturns. And then for younger investors, a lot of this really is more mental or emotional because they really won't need to tap their investments for many years. But this is where having a healthy understanding of market history and the normal up and down rhythms of the market can help give them confidence to just hold on through those downturns.
Wow, Mark, that's really helpful. All right, so the second key then to managing our emotions during a downturn is to have a plan. Mark, what does that look like?
Yeah, we harp on this a lot too because it's so important. You know, having a written investing plan can be such a lifesaver in times of market panic. You know, staying calm is just a lot easier if you can read your own clear-headed thinking about what you're going to do in the exact scenario you currently find yourself in. You know, you're reading your own voice telling you what to do. So this type of a plan needs to spell out your investing objectives and strategies, which includes what you're going to do when these market downturns happen.
Right. So why is it so important to put your investing plan actually down on paper?
Yeah, it's something so few of us actually do. But, you know, if you think about it, we've all seen people act illogically when they panic, when they're under a lot of pressure. You know, it's just part of human nature for our reason and logic to kind of be shut down or compromised when we're under a lot of stress. So, again, we're kind of talking to our future self when we write this down, telling ourselves what we've already decided our next step should be in advance. So for a younger investor, they might just write something in their plan that says, look, I have a lot of years ahead before retirement, so I'm going to weather downturns and continue to invest every month using my dollar cost averaging approach. Or for an older investor, they might say, look, I've set up a bucket approach to provide for my spending needs in the near term so I can afford to ride out these market corrections and let my longer term investments bounce back and recover their value.
Exactly. But it's also critical to have the right stuff in those buckets as well, isn't it?
Absolutely, Rob. I mean, this isn't just happy talk here. You've got to have the investing side right in the first place. And that's the next step. The third step is making sure your portfolio is suited to both your age and your tolerance for investing risk. And, you know, again, a 65-year-old shouldn't have the same asset mix as a 30-year-old investor. And that's why most of SMI's asset allocation models gradually reduce our equity holdings and ramp up bond holdings as an investor moves through these seasons of life. But overall, you know, knowing you've got an age-appropriate asset allocation is going to help you stay calm during downturns. Again, for younger folks, it's going to help them view these pullbacks as stocks being on sale. It's a buying opportunity for a younger investor. And older investors will know that if they've got their asset mix right, then the ballast of those bond holdings should help smooth out that ride. And as a side note, Rob, if people are hearing this and they don't know how to create a plan like we're talking about, lots of helpful information at soundmindinvesting.org about how to do that.
Well, that's exactly right. I would encourage you to check out soundmindinvesting.org. Mark, just a minute and a half left. I want to finish with the spiritual component for fighting panic. What thoughts do you have there?
Yeah, well, there's no better antidote to panic than prayer. And prayerfully recalling what God has said in Scripture about his care and concern for us, that's going to help us remain calm and confident regardless of what the market's doing. You know, Isaiah 26:3 says, you will keep in perfect peace all who trust in you, all whose thoughts are fixed on you.
Well, there you have it. 4 steps to panic-proof your portfolio. Be prepared, write out a plan, build a suitable portfolio, and above all else, invite God into the process. Mark, just a few seconds left. I understand there's a new version of the SMI handbook. Give us a quick preview.
Sure, yeah, believe it or not, this is the 7th edition. We've sold over 100,000 copies over the years.
Wow.
But the handbook is just a practical how-to guide. It's looking at our finances through a biblical framework and worldview. Basically, everything you'd glean from reading the newsletter, the SMI newsletter month after month, year after year, but it's all condensed and organized in one easy-to-use resource.
That's great. Well, Mark, thanks for stopping by today.
Always my pleasure, Rob.
You can pick up the new SMI handbook or read this article, How to Panic-Proof Your Investing, at soundmindinvesting.org. All right, your calls are next. Here's the number, 800-525-7000. 800-525-7000. We'll be right back.
Managing your money may seem like simple mathematics, but as author Paul David Tripp reminds us,
money issues are not first behavioral issues, they're heart issues.
And in his book, Redeeming Money, How God Reveals and Reorients Our Hearts, you'll learn how to prepare for the future and strengthen your walk with God. Right now, you can request your copy of Redeeming Money with any gift of $25 or more at moneywise.org. That's moneywise.org.
If the heavy burden of debt is robbing you of freedom and peace of mind, Christian Credit Counselors can help. We're a nationwide nonprofit credit counseling organization that has helped over 300,000 individuals in the last 27 years get out of credit card debt 80% faster while honoring that debt in full. To learn how Christian Credit Counselors can help you, visit ChristianCreditCounselors.org. That's ChristianCreditCounselors.org, or call 800-557-1985.
Welcome back to MoneyWise Weekend. I'm Rob West. We're so thankful to be in partnership with you as you call in and share your stories and your questions, and we get to serve you with our MoneyWise coaches and certified Kingdom advisors. We see this as a big family, a community of people that want to know God's heart related to managing His money, and we can do it better together as we journey together. So thanks for being a part. Let's head south to Hollywood, Florida. Joseph, thank you for your call, sir. How can I help you?
I had a question. I wanted to try to get rid of my PMI. I had gotten a mortgage through the FHA, and I refinanced once. I had a interest rate of like 4.75. Now I have 3.5. So I didn't know if it was a good idea to refinance again to get rid of that PMI. Yes.
Yeah. Well, yeah, as you know, you can. The only way you can get rid of the FHA equivalent of PMI is through a refinance. So we would be looking for you to get a 1-point reduction at a minimum in your interest rate, and then be able to plan to stay in that home for 5 years or more. And then I'd want to make sure also that the expenses associated with that were around 2%, not a whole lot more than that, the cost of the refi. So do you think you can do that? And if not, then unfortunately, you're going to have to look really hard at whether the cost of the refinance is going to be prohibitive for you, even though you're going to have to still continue to pay this PMI, which doesn't do anything for you, unfortunately. So give me a sense of whether you think you can meet those criteria.
I think I can. I was thinking, well, the last time I did it, I didn't have any money come out of my pocket because the property value had gone up. And because of that, I didn't have to have any money out of my pocket. I think it cost like maybe $800 or something like that, but then I got a credit.
Yeah.
So I ended up refinancing, and it didn't cost me pretty much anything that I could think of, that I had to put money out of my pocket or anything.
Okay, but yeah, even though you're not bringing money out of your pocket, you may be doing a couple of things. You may be extending the term of the loan, meaning so if you had a 30-year mortgage and you've been paying on it 3 years, you start over at 30 years, which is in the earlier years is where the most is going to interest. The second thing that may have happened there is even though it wasn't coming out of pocket, you increase the balance of the mortgage. So even though your home is rising in value, you're adding more debt to the property as well. So, just because you can do it and, result in a similar payment and you're not coming out of pocket with a lot of money doesn't mean that it makes sense financially, because what you need to look at is what is the total amount of interest you're going to pay over the life of the loan. And the only way to get that down is to decrease the interest rate and or decrease or at least match the term. So I don't want you to reset the term at a new 30 years, and I'd like for you to get that interest rate down. Otherwise, you're just going to continue adding, creeping that balance higher and higher, that mortgage balance, and, it's just not going to be financially effective for you. So I'd take a hard look at that. Let's make sure you can save at least a point on the interest rate. Let's make sure you're going to stay for 5 years, and let's make sure the expenses are no more than 2% of the value of the mortgage. Otherwise, I'd probably leave it alone, Joseph. But we appreciate you checking in with us today. Let's head to Strongsville, Ohio. Joe, thank you for calling. How can I help you?
Well, hey, in 1985, the property next door to me went up for a sheriff's auction, and I purchased it. It was 3 city lots. One of the lots has a house on it. I sold the house and the lot with the house. Now I have 2 city lots. I kept one for myself, and now I'm selling the other one. Now, they're going to be how do I figure out capital gains, or I would like to know how to figure out if I'm going to owe money on this or not.
Yes. Well, I would contact a CPA. I mean, there's a lot of moving pieces there, Joe. I mean, the bottom line is none of these are your domicile, so they're all subject to capital gains. So you're going to have to establish your cost basis for all the property, and then you're going to have to establish, as it's sold off, what portion of that is considered gain, where, it's appreciated beyond what you paid for it. And, that profit there between your original cost basis plus any improvements that you made minus the, subtracted from the sale price of any pieces of this, will help you determine exactly what's going to be subject to capital gains tax. So I would, if you don't have a CPA or accountant, this is the year to get one, and have that person look at all of the parcels and help you to establish the cost basis, so that as these are sold off, or now that they are sold off, that they exactly what is taxable and at what rate, and you can plan for that so that it's not catching you by surprise. In fact, some of that probably even needs to be prepaid. So that's going to be my best advice. If you don't have a CPA or accountant, you can connect with a certified Kingdom advisor in your area and ask for a referral. Just head over to our website, moneywise.org, and click Find a CKA. We appreciate your call today very much. Let's take an email or two. Patty is our next one up. Patty just says simply, how do I improve my credit score? Well, Patty, there's a couple of ways to do that. But first of all, let me just say, it's really critical that you understand that, when it comes to improving your credit score, you don't need to pay anybody to do that, because there's nothing they can do that you can't do yourself. So I think it's really important for you to understand that fundamentally. The biggest thing you can do, Patty, to improve your credit score over time is really in two areas. One would be just be an on-time payer. The second thing is keep those balances. I'd prefer them at zero, because we're only using the debt for budgeted items, but I realize that's not always practical. So make sure, from a credit scoring standpoint, not a financial management standpoint, but from a credit scoring standpoint, make sure those balances are under 30% of the limit. And then the other things that you have less control over, the length of your credit history, how much new credit you have, are you out there seeking credit, and your credit mix, multiple types of credit accounts. All of that together is what makes up your credit score. But the very best thing you can do over time is have active accounts where you're not carrying a balance, but where it's showing and being reported as on time every month, so that you're seen as an on-time payer. Patty, we appreciate your email. Folks, if you'd like to send us an email and have it read on the air, send it to us at questions@moneywise.org. Well, we're out of time once again, but we'll come back and do it all again next time. I appreciate your carving some time out of your busy day to join us here on the program. Remember, if you missed any part of today's program, or perhaps missed a past program, or want to hear it again, you can do that and check out our program notes at moneywise.org or on the free MoneyWise app in your app store. And then plan on joining us again next time, right here on MoneyWise Weekend.
MoneyWise Weekend is provided by MoneyWise Media and by listeners like you.